1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's the 10 Cut Commandments. What?
What's up, world? It's your boss, Kamal Nuru, a.k.a. Zo Mega Millions. You're now tuned in to BWTV, the podcast. I'm your host, and my special guest today is none other than, should I say Esquire?
Just Larry Welch.
Larry Welch.
Real estate attorney to the stars.
Yes, real estate attorney to the stars. How you doing, Larry?
I'm doing well. How are you doing? Come on.
I'm good. Don't worry, you can relax. It's just going to be smooth flowing, all right?
Mm-hmm.
So where you from, Larry?
I am from Brooklyn, New York. My family's from Guyana, parts of Jamaica. I grew up in Brooklyn, have since moved to a place called Sleepy Hollow in Westchester.
Mm-hmm.
Lived there with my wife, 2 kids, and living the life.
Okay, you're giving up all the juice.
I know. It must be over now. Let's go now.
What inspired you to be an attorney? How'd you get into that field?
How did I become an attorney? Well, I went to school. I was studying psychology at a certain point.
Okay.
And one of the only jobs for psychologists besides being like a psychotherapist is to do law, because a lot of times you have to speak to a jury, especially if you're a trial attorney. So that's one of the preferred undergraduate skills to have.
Okay.
Psychology. So I started doing that. My mom also worked at a law firm. Shout out to Jennifer. Still doing it, 2 jobs, that type of thing. And she helped me become a paralegal at that law firm. And from there, I realized that, I had a little calling for it. So, went to law school, Fordham Law, and been practicing 15 years now. And I love it. I just love it.
So right now you're with a firm, right?
Yes, I am.
But when we met, you were independent,
Yes,
right?
I was. Yep.
So tell me the differences between the two, and why did you move into that particular field of law?
Oh, why I got into real estate in particular, I liked it. I like it. It's one of the parts of law where, one, if you mess up, no one goes to jail. No one, if you mess up, it's just a building, it's just a lease, So there's a part of that. But I also do like the fact that when they say real estate, they're talking about it's a real thing that you can touch. So, say I work on a lease for a barbershop, I can do that work, and then, once we complete the work, I can go see the results of my work. I could see the proprietor running his business, running her business. I can see it, and a lot of parts of law aren't like that. I mean, securities law, stocks and bankruptcies, things like that. You're not really ever touching your creation.
Right.
So I did like that. And you'd asked about being at a firm versus being solo.
Right.
Being solo versus being at a firm. Being at a firm is more working with a team. I do real estate, but other people at my firm may do litigation, bankruptcy, corporate law. They may do other things. So if I need help putting a real estate deal together and it touches on any of those other areas, I just walk down the hall, knock on their door, and I have that expertise right there, right? But when you're solo, it's all on you.
Right.
Either you know it, you don't know it. There's no one there to help you. But I think it's very good training, to learn how to deal with people, how to get clients, because it is on you. If you don't find clients, you don't eat.
It's a little more hustle.
You have to hustle. Hustle.
Now, when you're with a firm in particular, does that increase your fee? You go by what the firm charges instead of choosing your own fees?
Yeah. I mean, that's a part of it, because when you're at a firm, it is a team, right? So everybody on the team has to decide how are they going to pay for the lights, how to keep the lights on, how to keep the big office that they have when you're at a firm. So there is a lot more of price collaboration. You have to know, all right, what are we going to charge? What do we need to charge to make sure that this firm is successful? And then opposed to being a solo practitioner, you could run a law firm by yourself in your apartment.
Right.
So then you just pay your rent and you decide what you charge people. So yeah, in general, a solo practitioner's fees are going to be lower. But depending on the firm, like in my firm, I have latitude to, depending on who needs help, who the client is,
Right.
and on the work, you have some latitude to change the fee structure.
And how is that done also when maybe the person you might be working with may be someone that you brought in, someone that you were working with before you got to the firm?
Sure.
Do you have any latitude with that?
Well, if depending on, it's a big algorithm. At the end of the day, firms, I don't know if you ever heard how firms work. It's usually billable hours. So every attorney does a certain number of billable hours. Say it's 2,000 hours a year that they have to be working on client matters. And then if you multiply that 2,000 by the amount they're charging,
Right.
say it's $100 an hour or whatever, that 2,000 billable hours times 100 says how much you made as your gross.
Right.
So within that structure, you're trying to hit targets, and the firm is trying to hit targets, but you could increase it here, you could lower it here, as long as at the end of the day, like I said, you meet your targets, and
Right.
the firm can make the money it needs to.
I definitely understand and know about the billable hours, but I didn't know that there was like a quota to reach, like
Right,
a certain
right.
amount
Right.
of hours per year.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah,
certainly.
that didn't even pass my
Yeah,
mind.
I mean, some firms it's 2,400 hours. Some firms is a lifestyle firm might be 1,600 hours. But they're always, even if you're not told there's a quota, like at any job, if you show up and you don't do anything for the whole year,
Right.
you're probably not going to be there the next year,
Right.
whether or not they told you had to do something. So
Right,
if they
right.
tell you it's say 1,800 hours per year, and everyone else is doing it, but you show up and you do 1,000 hours, obviously, someone else is paying the bill.
Right. So let's move on to some other ideas, some other questions. Of course, this is Barber World TV, and the premise is to, inform, talk about things that can help the barber community. In my experience, I mean, thank God, almost every lease that I ever had, I had representation. Unless it was something really simple, small thing that I didn't care much about. But I've watched other guys go into business and sign a lease on their own. And I've always told them, they don't think that fee in their budget, is as important. They said, oh, I could buy chairs with that money or something like
Right.
that. And I say, well, that's probably one of the most important things you should spend your money on, because it's the future of your business. And then I see them get stuck in a lease. I see they have some problems with the fixtures of the building or the facade or upstairs. And, they didn't negotiate any of that in their lease. So in your opinion, how important is it to have representation?
It's like, if you're talking about barbering, it's like, say someone walks into your shop and they say, you could cut their hair for them, or they could go home and cut their hair in the mirror.
Exactly.
Both times the hair is going to get shorter or whatever, but the better person is the person who does it every day.
Right.
So obviously, as a lawyer, I do it as a profession. I do it every day. For somebody, they might have 5 leases in their life. They might have their apartment, their business.
Right.
Maybe they lease a car or some equipment. But as an attorney, I do it every day. If I'm working on one barber lease for one space, I might have done 20 right before it. So I could tell you, all right, this is what landlords like to put in there to catch you here, or this is what they put to catch you there. I might have even worked with the same landlord previously.
We're gonna talk about that.
I might know the landlord that you're entering into a lease with. I might say, this landlord, she's great, or this landlord, don't go to that building. The building might look good, but the pipes are broken all the time. Or you'll ask the landlord, where's the heat, and you'll never hear from them. So there's that part of it.
Right.
There's the part that I've just sort of been in the business and I've seen the players and the relationships and the people. But even when you get to the document, a lot of people say, they look at a document as how long the document is, right? It's a 5-page lease. I could read this. And it's not really, law's not about, sometimes it's not about what's on the paper. Sometimes the law is about what's not on the paper.
Right.
So and that happens to people all the time. You ever go, you go to court or something for any matter, you bring the little 2-page contract, but then the judge says, yeah, but according to, this law or according to this principle of law, this is how it really works. And that's what we try to help, people with. Because look, a person who's running a business, if you run a barbershop, you run a restaurant, you don't know necessarily about the law of buildings.
Right.
You know how to cut hair, you know how to cook, you may be a great in your field.
Right.
But in this field of landlords and tenants and buying buildings and getting mortgages and things like that, and setting up your companies, you might just not know about it.
And how have you said you've been doing it for 15 years, practicing for 15 years. Have you seen changes in the law over this 15-year period? And like what types? Right.
Well, the types of law changes you saw a lot of stuff related to mortgages after all the, the mortgage crisis is like 10 years ago now. So there was a lot of changes there. But I think since I graduated from law school, the law of landlords and tenants has basically been the same.
Okay.
And how it works is the same. The landlords know how to run things. They might lease out 100 leases a year. A tenant is only doing a lease once every 5 years, once every 10 years. So the power balance is always in favor of the landlord. The landlord has an attorney. The landlord has a form. Even the forms that you get from a store are generally set up landlord friendly, right? So a tenant is at an automatic disadvantage. The landlord also has a company set up, right? The company might be a corporation, a limited liability company, where they've set up to protect their personal assets, whereas the tenant may come in and say, hey, my name's Larry Welch. Can I sign a lease? And they'll sign their name, Larry Welch, right on it.
Right.
And so the difference is, though, one thing, though, in the past, 15 years is that there are more resources for tenants out there. If you go on Google,
right,
you could find out a lot of information. Mm-hmm. It's all there. You can find out about landlords. You can find out about different forms. You could probably Google in, tenant-friendly form, barber-friendly form, and you could probably find something nice there as a starting point.
What is the common pitfalls you might see people get into with the lease?
Ooh.
Commercial, that is.
Yeah, commercial leases. With the commercial lease, I'm glad you said commercial versus residential. Right. So residential lease is like your apartment where you live. For anyone who's unfortunate enough to have gone to landlord-tenant court for non-payment or for staying past the lease, it's not a good place to be. Mm-hmm. You go in, maybe the judge will give you 6 months to stay, and then you have to leave. Commercial landlord-tenant, it looks nicer, but it's even stronger and more in favor of the landlord. If you don't pay your lease in a commercial space where you're running a business, you're gone. You're not getting 6 months. You're gone. You might be gone 3 weeks, after the landlord brings you there.
Right.
4 weeks. You see it a lot. You'll see a lot of, restaurants. Sometimes you'll see them 1 minute they're serving food. 3 weeks later, it's a totally different restaurant.
Right.
So it's a lot more at stake in a commercial lease. Mm-hmm. In residential, judges understand. The court is set up to be understanding.
Right.
In commercial, no, is
yeah.
Where's the money? Where's the money? If you don't have the money, you're out.
Right.
And the major pitfall with that is you have to look at a lease from the ending part, not from the beginning. So a lease will either end up with you making a ton of money in your business, being so successful, get into the end of your term, end of the 5 years or 10 years, and the landlord at that point will come to you and say, hey, do you want to stay for another 5 years or 10 years?
Right.
That's the good side. The bad side is, say you want to sell your business. Say someone comes to you and says, all right, well, hey, I want to buy that business. It's a great business. Sometimes you have to go and ask the landlord for permission,
right,
according to the lease.
Right.
Now think about that structure. someone says they're going to pay you, say they're going to pay you $100,000. You think the landlord's just at that point going to say, "Oh yeah, sure."
Right.
No, they're going to say, "You get what I'm saying?" So at that point, unless you've already thought about that from the beginning, to provide that the landlord has to give you consent.
Right.
Now you have to ask for permission, and when you ask for permission, that's when a landlord will say, "Oh, but
Ball's in my court.
Ball's in my court. I need some money."
I've seen in leases things say like within reason, stuff like that.
Reason, yeah.
Talk about the good guy.
Good guy?
Because this is the thing that was presented to me when my first lawyer's name was Stefan Henriquez. He did like our first lease, I don't even know if he's practicing anymore. He's probably older. I think he retired, but I see guys get stuck in a lease and they can't pay it anymore, and tell them the importance of having that added to the lease.
The good guy.
Tell them what it is.
The good guy is one of those. The good guy is two different things. There are people and there are companies, right? So Kamal, you're a person. Larry Welch, I'm a person, right? And even though and then there are companies. There's LLCs, there's corporations, there's partnerships and stuff.
Maybe
like that.
tell them the differences of that, so people that might not know.
So when you go into a lease and you start a business, you can either sign documents with your name, your individual name,
which you advise or don't advise.
Which I don't advise, because that when you sign with your individual name, now your individual bank accounts are on the hook.
Personally liable, they call it.
You're personally liable. Exactly.
Right.
Your bank account at Citibank or Chase is on the hook. You signed it with your name. The better way to do it is sign up with a company name that you set up. You set up a company, and now the company isn't Larry Welch. The company is, Lawyer LLC. It's a company I've set up. I own the company, and the company is signing all the leases and signing all the contracts. Now, it seems like, either way, I'm the one to put in my name. I'm going to sign with a pen.
Right.
But the entity that's on the hook is either me individually or the company.
Okay.
And if the company's on the hook, now when the landlord comes to me and says, Larry, you didn't pay the rent. No, it's not me who didn't pay the rent.
Right.
Is that Lawyers LLC didn't pay the rent.
Right.
Talk to them.
Right.
And it sounds funny in concept, but it's how the whole thing has to work. The whole thing has to work like that, because that LLC is the one doing the business. It's the one entering into contracts with, Gillette Corporation to buy razors, or buying paper from Mead Incorporated.
Right.
So it's set up to be the companies in business with one another.
Right.
The important part about that is if that company doesn't pay, the company is on the hook. The individual is not.
Right.
I have a wife, I have kids, I have things like that. I can't be putting our money on the line for a business that's a venture, something I'm trying to make money. I'm not trying to go bankrupt individually over that.
But
so this is where the good guy guarantee comes in. So landlords, knowing that, they say to themselves, "Look, Larry, I know you set up this LLC, Lawyer LLC. No, I don't want that. I want you to guarantee." Individually, I want you, Larry Welch, to guarantee that Lawyers LLC will pay.
That's what I was getting to.
Right.
They still want a personal guarantee.
Exactly.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, the guarantee is sort of like when, I don't know if any had your parents guarantee your leases when you were a kid, or maybe your kid is asking you to guarantee it. A guarantee is essentially a backstop for the landlord, so that the landlord knows they're going to get their money.
Right.
They're either going to get it from the tenant, that LLC that I set up, or they're going to get it from the person called the guarantor, that individual, Larry Welch individually, or Kamal individually.
Yeah.
That's called a guarantee. So if the tenant doesn't pay, the landlord's coming after both the tenant, the company that's set up, and the individual.
Right.
The good guy is another play on that guarantee.
Right.
So there's a few different levels of that structure, right? You have the lease, pay the rent. You have the guarantee. If you don't pay the rent, then that person who runs the company pays the rent.
Right.
The good guy is a limitation on that guarantee. It
Right.
says, and the good guy only really works in New York, maybe Chicago, maybe LA, places with a lot of people, a lot of tenants, a lot of fast moving businesses.
Okay.
If a landlord goes to court and they say to themselves, say they're in New York, right, on nice avenue like 125th or something, or Flatbush, or
Right.
Park Avenue, they don't want to go to court to get their space back if you didn't pay, right? Going to court, granted, it only takes a week or two, but they still have to go to court. They still have to pay legal fees. They still have to wait for judges, wait for a marshal to get the tenant out. Say that takes 3 months. Say it takes 3 months. During that 3 months, in a big city like this, they could have had someone else come in and open a business.
Right.
They could have had a different tenant in there.
Right.
Right? So a landlord might say to themselves, you know what, Larry? You know what, Kamal? Just be a good guy. Give me back the keys. Just give me back the keys. You give me back the keys, and I won't go after you individually.
Right.
That's good guy guarantee. Give me the keys. Be a good guy. Just take your stuff out, and then I'll find a new tenant.
Right.
I might still sue the tenant company or whatever, but that's not going to affect your individual bank account.
Right.
And a smart tenant, a smart guarantor would say to themselves, that's the way to go.
Right.
Give the keys back, take your stuff out, live to fight another day, start a new business somewhere else.
But that's usually something that's put in there by the tenant, not the landlord.
Your broker should know that.
Yeah.
Your broker, what almost or maybe more important than having a good lawyer when you're a tenant is having a good broker. A lot of times a broker is the guy who the broker is paid by the landlord.
Right.
But the broker is the one who's going to remember to put in things like good guy guarantee, protections for if the water pipes break. They'll be the first line because they set up what's called the term sheet.
Right. But sometimes that I haven't experienced a broker representing me that way and putting those things in my experience. 1 and 2, half the times it's just a for rent sign on the door and you call.
Exactly.
Sometimes there's really no representation. So it's important for you to even know about it, to ask for it if you don't see it in there.
Yeah, definitely. Right. And I think as soon as you see that for rent sign, or as soon as you go to the landlord's office to sign up an application or any sort of term sheet, that's when you call your lawyer. Right. Because the term sheet is, even though it's only a page or two, that's going to have all the details of the lease that you're entering into. That 2-page term sheet is going to turn into the 50-page, 60-page lease that you sign.
Right.
But it has the most important parts.
Do you negotiate the term sheet?
Yes, you do.
Okay, so you negotiate the term sheet right off the bat.
You should start negotiating right off the bat because, for most people in the business, I would say, what's on the term sheet controls. Once you get the lease and the lease is drafted, unless it's different from the term sheet, it's hard to get things changed. So do it in the very beginning. As soon as you meet the landlord, as soon as you walk through the space, if you see anything you want them to fix, put it in the term sheet. If they ask you for a guarantee and it just says guarantee, make sure you say, no, good guy guarantee. Put that in the term sheet so that there's no confusion later on once you put the lease together.
Right. Let's talk about, because one thing that was usually in the good guy guarantee is the securities, and you don't get that back. So what's your idea on security as far as I've experienced where I felt like the landlord asked for too much security. And I understand some of them asking for a certain amount of security, maybe for a new business.
Yep.
But then again, I think sometimes I guess it just depends on the landlord. Some of them just get greedy and ask for a lot. So what would be the norm if there is one?
Yeah, I don't think there's a norm. Okay. I don't think that, with a residential apartment lease, I think a norm is probably, 1 month rent. Right. Maybe 2 months rent, depending. In a commercial lease, it's not really based on that. It's based on, put yourself in the landlord's shoes for a second. If the landlord knows that you've set up an LLC or a corporation and they might not be able to get money from them if that company goes bankrupt, all they can really rely on is getting the security deposit and the good guy guarantee, right? The good guy guarantee, they still have to sue you for.
Right.
The security deposit is held by the landlord. So, as a landlord, if the tenant breaks something, if they break their whole space and destroy it, how much will that cost to fix?
Right.
That's one way to look at your security, right? If it's going to cost me $50,000 to fix it, if he breaks all the pipes and doesn't paint and breaks the walls, theoretically, then I want $50,000 security, right? Maybe my concern is something else. Maybe my concern is, I don't know if this guy's business is going to run too well. I don't know if I trust his business.
Right.
If it's McDonald's, right, I know McDonald's is going to make money.
Right.
I know that guy is going to be there for 20 years. Maybe then my security deposit is lower because I know he's going to pay. But especially when you're a new business, you will have higher security deposits. You're certainly going to have a guarantee, But what you would tell a landlord as a tenant, what I would tell them is, I say, look, landlord, if I give you all this money as security, if I give you 5 months rent, 6 months rent, 12 months rent, that's less money for me to run my business and be successful.
Right.
And that money that I'm giving you might lead to me not making it for a year, 2 years, 3 years.
Right.
How long does the average new business last in New York?
Probably like 2 years. I think.
2 years?
I mean, the ones that don't make it.
The ones that don't make it.
They do say, what, you get past 5 years, you'll be all right? Something like that?
Yeah. So most businesses that fail early.
Right.
So as a landlord, look, I'm going to need that money. I had a friend, he had a restaurant, had a great restaurant. But a lot of the money that he gave to the landlord as security could have been used to pay, his waiters and waitresses, marketing, advertising, things like that. And instead of the business failing and the landlord keeping a little security, the landlord could have let the tenant hold on to the security, use it for business, and had a successful business. So what you want to tell a landlord is you have to impress upon a landlord that it's a symbiotic relationship between you and them. You know what I mean? The more they take from you, whether it's rent, whether it's security deposit, the less you have to be successful and pay them rent.
Right.
So you tell them, look, low security deposits, I'll guarantee it. I'll give a guarantee, but low security deposits, low rent up front. I don't want to pay rent the first 3 months I'm there, first 6 months. Those are the hardest months.
Right.
I'm doing repairs. I'm putting in, I'm painting.
Yeah, you can negotiate maybe 1 or 2 months rent free to get in there, and if you have to, depending on how much work you need to do inside the space.
Yeah, so try to impress upon, get the right landlord. The right landlord will help your business run better. Right. Because your lease is probably, besides employee fees, your lease may be the most expensive part of your business.
Right.
So
let's talk about the terms, because I've also experienced people negotiating 2 years, no options. I've always been under the impression they get the most amount of years and the most amount of options up front, so I don't have to negotiate later on, because I know it takes time to build a business. So what's your perspective on that?
A 2-year lease? I don't what they say, low risk, low reward. The shorter the lease, the less your exposure, right? Because no matter what, when you look at your lease, if you look at a 10-year lease, you need to go to your calculator, take that lease amount, multiply it by the rent over the entire term, and that's your full exposure. Okay? So if you have a 1-year lease, you probably have a low exposure. So it's gonna be 1 year, 12 months rent. Say you pay $5,000 a month, that's $60,000. Once you start getting longer leases, you're on the hook. So even if I go out of business on month 1, I still owe the landlord the whole thing, the whole lease.
But that's when the good guy guarantee comes in.
Yeah, subject to the good guy. Subject to the good guy. And and there's a lot of interplay. There's a lot of interplay back and forth. But the tenant, is on the hook technically for the whole thing.
Right.
So options are nice. Options are nice because you're not on the hook for options. Right. Renewal options are good.
I'm thinking about the barbers who are maybe in the shop and they want to open their own business.
Yep.
And they're looking at a location. And they call that broker or the landlord and they want to enter into this lease. What are the things that they should look out for in a lease?
I think before you even get to the lease, there are certain pitfalls that you get. I think when you enter into your first lease, please call a lawyer.
All right.
Especially your first one. I mean, you've been doing this a while. Once you've done 5-10 leases, you might be able to wing it and figure it out. But, you're running a business, right? You have a certain amount of money to open the business. Mm-hmm. Make sure you have enough. Right. Don't think that you're going to, you might not make $1 million in the first month. You might not make any money in the first month. So make sure you have a good reserve. That's the main thing I could tell anyone, any business. Make sure you have 6 months, 12 months reserve if you could get it. Get as many people involved. Some people want to do it by themselves.
Right.
That's not you don't want to put your money on it. Get a group together. Even if they're not barbers, put a group together, explain what you want to do. Tell them, look, I'm still going to be in charge. I'm going to run the business, but I need your help. I need your money. Put that together and then go from there. Make sure you have enough money backed up. Secondly, don't give money out willy-nilly to people. A lot of times what happens is people will get a great investment together. They have a great investment group. Now, all of a sudden, they're sitting there with $100,000, $200,000, $300 in their pocket. And that's when you get into trouble because now you have so much money. You're like, yeah, we can buy this. We can buy the top of the line this.
Right.
Or a landlord broker comes to you and says, hey, give me $5,000. I'll make sure you get the lease. Come to find out, he might have said that to 10 other people.
Right.
Come to find out, he might not even work for the landlord. So, especially in New York, there's a lot of scams. There's a lot, you know how it is. So you have to be vigilant. You have to pay attention. You have to be a little stingy with the money because at the end of the day, it's your company's money. So be aware of things that are too good to be true. Be aware of someone who won't sign stuff. Someone won't sign
Tell me
things.
some experiences that you might have had.
I mean, people will say, here's a 50-page lease. Here's a 50-page lease, and then you say, but the water doesn't work here, or the electricity doesn't work. And the landlord says, don't worry, I'll fix it for you I'll fix it for you. Just sign the lease. You sign the lease, and then you look in the lease, and it says, landlord is not responsible for fixing water and electric.
Right.
You go to the landlord and you said, hey, you told me. And the landlord will point to the other part of the lease that says anything that's not in the agreement written here is not valid. It even says whatever the broker representations are, whatever the broker told you is not valid unless it's in the lease.
Right.
So those are things that you can read for yourself and you say to yourself, you know what it says. And it says right there on the lease what it says. But the broker might tell you something else. The landlord's representative might tell you something else. Trust what you read.
Right.
And if if it's different than what they're telling you, tell them to write it in. If they don't write it in, maybe you don't want to sign that lease.
Have you experienced maybe a landlord, or you represent a landlord, or you represent a tenant, and the lease is just going back and forth with a whole bunch of little petty things? You know what I mean? Like it takes forever to get the lease done.
Leases take forever. Leases take a long time, and yeah, I mean, I've never seen a lease done in. It takes what they call turns. I mean, the landlord usually writes the lease and they give it to the tenant. Tenant's attorney looks at it. They might make some changes in it, send it back to the landlord. Landlord thinks about what you wrote or changed, and if they agree with it, they'll change the lease. Otherwise, they'll cross it out and send it back. I've seen it go back 10, 15, 20 times. I mean, it can go back and forth, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Okay.
I think you have to look at it again. You have to look at it not as my monthly rent is $5,000. No, you have to look at it as the entirety of the lease. You have to look at it as this is a $200,000 investment.
Yeah.
Not including all the equipment I put in and the fixing the walls and the electric. It's a big investment.
I've never looked at it that way. If I would have looked at it that way, I might not have signed some of those leases.
Exactly. It's a big thing. And I don't think people look at it like, it's like a bunch of Ferraris. It's like buying a bunch of Ferraris. Like no one would do it willy-nilly.
Right.
They wouldn't do it on just, the salesman told me the cars work, so I'm going to sign it. No, you would research it. Mm-hmm. You would look into it. You go on the net. You might ask your friends, ask lawyers about it. Same thing with a lease. You have to, sometimes just by waiting, they might say they have someone else. That someone else is not you. That someone else is not, there's not one perfect building in New York, especially in New York City.
Right.
There's not one perfect building. Oh my God, I have to have that building. No, what you have to have is you have to keep your head. You have to pay attention. You have to watch the landlord. If the landlord's rushing you, why are they rushing you?
Right.
Right? You have to look at it. Yeah, you're special. I'm special. We're all special, but why does he want me? Maybe he wants me because I'm the sucker who's just going to sign up the lease immediately.
Yeah.
And
it's surprisingly that they will present it to you for you to sign on your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you're no, we don't have time to wait for your lawyer. If you don't sign it now, that's the main thing. I think read it, but realize that a lot of it, there are a lot of things you can get that a lawyer might know to ask for. You could get free rent, like I said before. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you could get the first 5 months free, 6 months free. Mm-hmm. Because they know their space is going to require a lot of work. You can get free rent. You can get them to pay for your repairs a lot of the time. If you say, I need to install things, will you pay my contractor to do it? Will you pay my architect to design it? A lot of landlords will do that because they know that if you fix up their building, it makes their entire building more valuable.
Right.
But you have to know to ask for it. You have to know that these things are available. What if I'm running my
half
business
of it, right?
Or pay half or what if my business, I'm running a business. What if the pipes break in the winter? It's freezing. What if they break and I can't open for business? Do I have to pay rent? An ordinary lease says, yes, you do have to pay rent. I'm not agreeing to that. If the pipes broke because the landlord didn't maintain it.
You're not negligent, right?
As long as I didn't do it or I was negligent, then I don't want to pay rent. So things like that, there are little tricks of the trade that you can, but I don't want to give them all away for free.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are a lot of things you can ask for.
Okay, well, that leads us to wrap this up. And there may be some people out there looking for your service.
Yeah, sure.
How can they find you?
You can find me, you can call me.
Okay.
You could call me at 212-907-7300. Ask for Larry Welch. I'm somewhere on Google. I'm sure you can find my picture. But that's the best way. Just call me, 212-907-7300.
Cool. So, thank you, brother. Thanks for your time and information.
Thanks so much.
I've been cutting these heads for years. It made me a master. There's rules to this shit to get money faster. A cut by cut booklet for you to get your game on track. Not your lines pushed back. Rule number uno.